You're listening to episode 59 of Have the Nerve, and on this episode we're talking about accessible public transport, what happens when you don't have access to it, and the real-life consequences for a lot of drivers with disability if they're stranded on the side of the road.
My name is Sarah Jane Staszak. What do? I do a lot of things. I raise a son. I have 2 dogs. I have, in the last 3 years, been working as the Peer and Family Support Coordinator for SCIA in the Blue Mountains and Central West.
This year, SJ was stranded on the side of the M4 in New South Wales. It's a motorway that starts near Strathfield and travels all the way to the base of the Blue Mountains. She was stranded for 4 hours after her car broke down. And it just so happened that she knew someone who had a trailer to help her transport herself and her power chair. But what if she didn't? What if she didn't have anyone? Listen to her story.
Well, my biggest transport issue in this last 12 months has been a converted van that needed a new engine. So I think I'm up to about 8 months now without my own transport. I self-drive from my power wheelchair in a VW van. And so I've been forced to use a lot of public transport in the last while. Fortunately, the Mountains train line has recently acquired the new fleet of trains that actually are much more accessible. I don't have to sit in the vestibule next to the toilet and no heating or cooling. And now I can actually get in, and there's even disabled toilets on there. So the trains are actually not too bad. They do come with their own nuances. But I guess the biggest issue that I've noticed over the years, and that's impacted me significantly recently, is the lack or the crisis of the lack of wheelchair accessible taxis. And probably the best story of the moment was last week breaking down on the M4, where it's a 110 kilometre an hour stretch of road just before the exit to Penrith. And I pulled over and called NRMA, and a tow truck came because the priority was to get me off the unsafe road. But the issue was the truckie, the tow truck driver couldn't transport me, and the NRMA were helping to try and find a wheelchair taxi, but neither they nor myself could get one, and consequently I was stuck there for about 4 hours. And if I didn't have a friend with a trailer and a tow ball and the ability to be able to hoik me from my wheelchair into the passenger seat, if I didn't have him, I probably would still be there, potentially. No, they didn't have any way of transporting me off the road.
When I first started at SCIA, they actually asked me if I wanted to have a look at the future of trains going through the mountains. And so the trains that are coming through the mountains now, I remember doing some user testing with them like 10 years ago. So that should speak some volumes to our listeners about how long it takes to get an accessible piece of transport to go into a regional area in the Blue Mountains. So yeah, you had one guy that you could rely on, thank God. But like, surely there's panic that sets in, you know?
I'd literally just picked it up 5 days before. And I was down at a thing in Sydney, making my way back home into the mountains. And, some narky dashboard lights started flashing up. And when they're red, you got to pull over straight away. The amber ones aren't so bad, but yeah. And look, honestly, panic didn't sort of sink in because I'm still here today. I've always been able to find a solution to whatever crisis that I might find myself in. But I do have to say this time, if I didn't have my mate to come and get me, I could not see a potential plan, like what would be the next backup plan, and I honestly couldn't see one.
So we're currently in Wentworth Falls right now, which is in the Blue Mountains in New South Wales. For people who aren't really familiar with the geography of Australia, we do have listeners that are in 64 countries, obviously for obvious reasons, might not know where the Blue Mountains is. Public transport has been, at least in my eyes, a real issue. Accessing it, frequency, finding where it is. The Blue Mountains isn't like a metropolitan area where you might be able to easily go down the street or something like that. So in your situation, SJ, maybe you've called like a accessible taxi driver that you might have known in the area to come and help you, and you're not able to do that now. You want to talk a little bit about it?
Look, we've had pretty much one wheelchair accessible cab servicing the whole Blue Mountains region, which is, from the Nepean River all the way up to Lithgow. And really, it's been this one bloke. His name's Brian, and he's throwing in the towel because he's such a dedicated, kind person. He's exhausted because he does his best to try and help as many people as he can, but he's a one-man band, so he's actually throwing in his taxi licence. And what that means is there's now no taxi for the region. And last night I met with some local community members that use Brian as a service, and we were having a dinner to thank him and farewell him. And he has enjoyed meeting the community and really appreciates the role that he's played, but I'm not quite sure what's going to happen next.
Yeah, because when I was growing up, there were two people who drove wheelchair accessible taxis in the Blue Mountains, and then there was one. The importance of being able to have access to transport in a regional area, people don't understand it. Well, they might not understand it. They don't understand what an absolute blow to the community is because there's only one left. What do you think we need to be thinking about when it comes to public transportation of this sort of nature? Because you can't guarantee that everybody in a wheelchair will be able to get on a bus or to be able to access a train station. It might not be near them. Certainly in the Blue Mountains, there are a lot of hills. It might not be feasibly possible for them to be able to mobilise to get over there in the first place. What's something like not having access to specifically taxis do to somebody's confidence, to, what it means to be an independent person with a disability?
Well, seriously, I think just before even there's an issue with transport, the human often is already isolated and perhaps maybe a little bit kind of stuck at home, which feeds upon itself as to how much confidence they've got to leave home, and that then just perpetuates upon itself. And then if there's no taxis, then how do they leave their home? And just to give you context, just in the last few months, I've missed a funeral because I couldn't get a taxi. I've just missed out on so many things. But the issue, I guess, in relation to what happened to me on the M4, that's a safety issue. And as far as how to deal with safety issues like that's the question that I don't know the answer. I'm not quite sure how it works in that big sort of tiers of government and legislation. I am really looking forward to seeing what this will look like in 10 years' time, and if there's been any movement. It just lends itself to people becoming more and more isolated with more mental health issues and less inclination to, or even an understanding on how they can help themselves move forward.
Well, what do you reckon? Is there many people with disabilities in the mountains that have similar disabilities to ourselves?
Well, I don't know the statistics, but the thing, I've actually had people say there's not many people with disabilities in the mountains. You don't see them around. I wonder why we don't see them around.
Hi, my name's Tony. I've been working in disability advocacy since around 2010, so that's 16 years, across individual, systemic and representative advocacy. My role is Disability Inclusion and Insights Advisor.
So, Tony, I've brought you onto the podcast today to be the fountain of knowledge around accessible transport, specifically accessible taxis, which you've done quite a lot of work in. And you had mentioned to me that you were working with SJ around a couple of things. So do you mind filling in some details?
Well, it was mainly just to investigate what options SJ would have. And what we did think about was, given the state of taxis and the lousy response that she got in terms of getting one, we wondered whether or not this amounted to an issue of discrimination. So there's two ways to go about it. We're in New South Wales, so there's the New South Wales Anti-Discrimination Board and there's New South Wales legislation. Or is it a matter of making a direct complaint to the Australian Human Rights Commission? we sought advice on this. We went to the Justice and Equity Centre and had a meeting with them. They have solicitors that have done a lot of work in the disability space, the NDIS, trying to make it fairer. They've also worked with me previously on air travel when I had an air travel issue. So they are the experts on the legislation. So we did have a meeting with them to talk about the issue. They were certainly interested. They didn't give us an answer in terms of the assistance, but they said they'd have a think about it and look at, what might the options be. So that was kind of like the process that we took to look at this. And I think just what this emphasises is the vulnerability that people with disability have, specifically if they're in some areas, and that so it might be outer metropolitan or some regional areas where there just aren't adequate transport services available, and that includes taxis. If you rely on a wheelchair and you can't transfer yourself in and out of your chair, you are the only mode of transport is a wheelchair accessible taxi, and so you might be waiting. You can book a service, but there's no guarantee you'll actually receive it.
Hey guys, it's Susan, cutting myself off on my own podcast. I just want to thank everyone again for their continued support and listenership of Have the Nerve. I'm always striving to bring you experiences that are as diverse as disability is itself. I would love if you can help me out this year. As we're approaching our 5th year of Have the Nerve, I would like your input into topics that would interest you. If it helps, go through the Rolodex of this podcast if you're a new listener to see what has been spoken about. And if you think, wouldn't it be great if you covered... I want to know. So email me at community@scia.org.au. This will be in the show notes with the subject heading podcast topic request. It'll really help me a lot and it will be much appreciated. Now back to our regularly scheduled program. Tony, you've got a disability, and do you take more accessible taxis than you do other public transport, or is it a mix of both? Like, what do you do?
So I use wheelchair accessible taxis regularly, at least 4 times a week, and that is to access my workplace, but also to go out and about in the community. I have a regular taxi driver who's reliable, so that does make a difference. And what you do find is those that rely on a wheelchair accessible taxis will often have their own driver that they will engage, and that's how they'll go about it rather than call the network.
And so because of those reasons, like, you're living in the Blue Mountains, your only accessible wheelchair taxi driver, there would be a reliance, especially if you want to go out at night. I don't know if people are aware who live in metropolitan areas, but, again, I'm just using the Blue Mountains. That train comes once an hour and it stops at a certain time, and then you might not be able to get where you need to be. So if you don't have a license, you don't have a car, or you just want to go out that night and have a bit of a fun time in a regional or a rural community, finding a wheelchair taxi is pretty important.
And your circumstance is common to so many people in outer metropolitan and regional areas. And people do feel isolated for those very reasons, because they have limited transport options.
So in SJ's case, she ended up just happening to know somebody who had a trailer, who went to assist her on the side of the road to get her power chair into a back of a trailer. It's a lot more than just thinking about the fact that we didn't have options for an alternative wheelchair taxi or vehicle like that. There's also a dignity issue when it comes to these sorts of things. She's stuck on the road for 4 hours. And then at the end, she just happened to know somebody who was capable of transporting her and the wheelchair. That's 4 hours that you know, she's not going to get back. There was no alternative options. And then it was kind of a little bit of an undignifying experience.
Unfortunately, this is a common occurrence for some people with a disability, and it isn't really good enough. And you do find, unfortunately, that people with disability have to be resourceful and have to find ways around this. So whether that is relying on family or alternative ways to actually get assistance, but if you are in that vulnerable position where you break down, it is likely that you'll, especially on a freeway, it is likely that you will be waiting for many hours for assistance because the NRMA has no way to assist anyone with a disability. Unless a taxi is willing to come out, and what they often do now is, and it's not actually lawful, but they will often say, "Well, I'll come out and be willing to pick you up," but they will set a minimum fee in order to do that.
I do remember a time when my it's quite a long time ago, like 10 years ago, when my car broke down on the side of the M4 and a tow truck came, and we all just realized at that moment that I can't climb into a tow truck. And I don't really know if they can assist me by law. They would not be able to probably physically be able to assist me because I can get out of my wheelchair, but like I can't pull myself up at that height. So then I happened to then call my mum. I was so upset, and mum phoned a friend of hers who then came and took me on the shoulder of the M4 because I was using her car at the time, so it's not like she could have gotten to me anyway. But that is such a panic experience.
And it's unsafe. It's not safe. So we have written to the New South Wales Minister for Transport. We also wrote to the Point-to-Point Commissioner, and we did get a meeting with the Commissioner, and also at the same meeting we had a meeting. There was a policy person from Transport for New South Wales where I was able to answer some of those questions, and that was a positive meeting just to talk about some of those issues. That we raised, that there simply, since COVID, there's been a lot less wheelchair accessible taxi operators and drivers available. So the numbers have gone down. So that's obviously affected service provision. There's been issues around compliance and also the new smart card that's available. It's not always operational depending on who the taxi provider is. There's been issues around taxis not starting the meter at appropriate times and running the meter down early and charging above what the fare is. And there's also been issues around the meter not being in an accessible position for the passenger to see what the pay rate is and what the destination fee is when you arrive. There's been many issues that we've raised with the Commission.
What do you think has happened to maybe not protesting, but protesting or that sort of thing over the decades? I just feel like it's been really aggressive in the 60s and 70s, but I just find that it's just getting less and less around this sort of stuff, like disability, that kind of thing. Of course, all of us have a disability and we're here now talking about it. So yes, we're recording this now, but we can't guarantee it's going to get to the right people. We can't guarantee that people who listen to this podcast recording is going to be like, holy shit, we need to do something right now and I have the power to do it. What do you think has changed?
I think people run out of gumption.
Yeah.
You know, look, take myself for example. I've sat on the Access Advisory Committee with my local council for most of the last decade, and I just had an issue with my local dog park, literally 2 blocks away, that's been inaccessible since my first service dog was 2. She's now 11, and I've got my successor dog to her, and he's a ADHD crazy young Labrador. I've got to get him out for exercise, and I can't actually get into the dog park because of some erosion and a step at the gate. Now, that's been something that I've been rallying for all these years, and I'm finally getting action now, but only because of the desperate need with a new dog. I had to re-inspire some motivation to have my voice heard. And I, 3 weeks ago, I think I was having my 5 minutes of fame on the front page of the local Gazette, talking about this taxi driver that's wrapping up his business, his work. But that stuff is all well and good for people to read while they're having their coffee, but it just doesn't really have any effect. It might create a little bit of more of an awareness, but that's the thing. To answer your question, I think people just get burnt out. Just talking to people that in council, and it's all about budget half the time, and we've got an advisory committee that gives advice, but I've been close to just throwing it all away many times because I'm exhausted by it. I kind of get really exhausted, and I'm sure that's probably what's happening in this current generation of people with disabilities.
I guess I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked SJ. There are so many things going on in the space of disability advocacy, and you've obviously worked in advocacy for ages and ages, and it is something that I'm certainly very interested in. And we've both taken paths where we're both trying to at least make people take disability awareness a little bit more seriously, disability advocacy a little bit more seriously. We have so many issues regarding these things that have been going on for quite a while. Do you think people, what have you observed?
I think we have to recognise that there are still important issues that need advocacy on. And there have been improvements over the years. And what I would say or add to that is advocacy does work, or it can work. It may not happen overnight, but whether it's protesting, whether it is writing to important government agencies or ministers, whether there are ways to actually raise issues, and having a voice in the disability space is very important. And there are good advocacy organisations that are doing some of that work, including providing individual advocates. So there are ways to approach these things, but there is still a lot more work to do, and transport is certainly one of them. And it's not, public transport. Trains are a little bit more accessible, as are buses. But it's there are still many issues, and it still doesn't address that some people with disability are reliant on taxis for transport access.
So if people are in communities where they feel like this is also affecting them, and they're listening to this podcast now and they're like, this is exactly the same situation that I'm going through right now, what do you suggest people start doing to try and, I guess, shed light on their situation, no matter where they are in Australia?
Always remember that you've got disability advocacy organisations that can help and amplify voices, or your own voice. Think about elected members, so your local state member rocking up to their office and introducing yourself and making them aware of what the issues are. That's another important way to actually raise issues, writing to governments, both state and federal, or even local government as well. To just raise your voice and talk through those issues. So the more people have a better understanding of what it is that you're going through as an individual, because the average individual takes things for granted, that they can just go about their lives and access a local community and access local transport, but that's not the case for people with disability.
There's got to be a way that we can get to these people.
I even have been asked to run workshops like on universal design for my local council, project managers, people in that side of the business or the organisation or the council. And I've actually brought up a wheelchair and got people to sit in it and just say, well, you go up to this counter. If the counter's up at that level, the person can't see you there. And for them to actually experience that had more of an impact. And I gave them a scenario to get from the place that we were, was the cultural centre in Katoomba, and I said, you guys need to, let's do a scenario. You're a family, your wife is in this wheelchair, you've got to get back to the Carrington Hotel. And I set it up in a spot where I knew they were going to come across a blockage. They weren't going to be able to get a wheelchair. And it was only then that they started to appreciate what it was like to actually be down here at this level on these wheels. And to be honest with you, I wouldn't have been thinking along these same lines before I sat in a chair. You either need to have a family member or someone you know to really appreciate. Even with my car being gone these last few months, friends will say, oh, look, I'll come and pick you up and I can take you down. And they're people that have known me this whole time I've had this spinal cord injury. They don't get that this 150 kilogram chair can't just go in the boot and I can't just sit in the seat of the passenger seat. So yeah, I suppose it really is just, they've got to have the lived experience before they can really have the true empathy, I feel.
Like literally lived experience.
Literally, yeah, sadly. And you wouldn't wish this on your worst enemy in many cases, but that's the thing. I wouldn't have. I can't blame them because I was blindsided. I knew nothing about disability beforehand. And now I get it because I'm living it.
You've been listening to Have the Nerve, a podcast about disability. This episode has been written, produced and edited by me, Susan Wood, as part of our resource hub. You can find the link in our show notes. And don't forget to tell all of your besties. If you want to visit our resource hub, you can find it at scia.org.au. Thank you for listening.